welcome to my kitchen. Going to be doing a few recipes as part of the Heritage Open Days for Edible England theme. Now, bread possibly has some local associations in that there were a number of mills, some water mills and some steam mills locally. They were all out of action before the turn of the 1900s, so no mills locally, but Marriage's mills have been going since 1824 and they're only 3 miles down the road. So I have, I'm using some of their bread today to actually make some different loaves. I have checked as well, there were local bakers, there were 3 local bakers here, but they were only functioning up until 1961 was the latest. So after that date, all of the bread was actually brought into Danbury. I believe the Tea on the Green were doing a little bit of baking after the event, but not for very long. They're not doing that now. I think they're making pies and things like that. So what I've done with the bread is just a standard recipe. 500 grams of flour and about 330 grams millilitres of water. Obviously yeast. Now I don't feel bad about using dried yeast because even Mrs. Beeton in her 1899 book talks about dried French or German yeast. So this is a French yeast and that obviously needs to be activated by putting it in warm water for 10 minutes and then it's added to the flour. So I did this an hour ago, so it's now ready for shaping. Okay, going to do 2 different shaped loaves. I have asked local people what sort of shaped loaves they were able to buy from the local bakers, and I'm reliably informed that they were cottage loaves and bloomers. So we're going to have a little cottage loaf and a little bloomer. So what I'm doing now is what's called chafing the dough. It just builds up a little bit of tension in it. I'll do that with this one as well. And this is the shaping part, so just again trying to get some tension into this so that all the rise is trapped within the dough. So that's a little mini bloomer. Now I've experimented with these ones and I've got to be careful it doesn't hit the top of the oven. So with a floured finger, just put it in the centre there. Now these guys will need to rise for an hour, so we'll come back to them later. Okay, I'm probably going to destroy the sales of mushroom ketchup with this little story here. When I first started doing research for the neighbourhood plan for Danbury, one of the stories that I picked up was that of the Pickled Knight, who is buried in St John's Baptist Church in Danbury. So you will find out in a minute why mushroom ketchup has a particular association with the church. So I'm reading from the Guide to the Parish Church. On October the 16th, 1779, as a grave was being dug in the north aisle, some say for a member of the Fitch family, and original parish records do indeed cite the burial on October the 18th, 1779, of Mrs. Frances Fitch, aged 68, sister to the late Thomas Fitch, Esquire of Danbury Place. Now interestingly, this little house here, although it was built in 1832 as part of what was Danbury Park at the time, later to be Danbury Palace, this is the estate of Danbury Place as well. So when they were digging in the north aisle, they found a lead coffin, and Mr. T. White, thought to be the village doctor, sent an account of the discovery to the Gentleman's Magazine in 1789. volume 59, page 337 if you want to check, which described an elm coffin enclosed therein. The lid of this coffin was removed, which revealed a further inner resinous shell. The lid of this shell was carefully taken off to reveal the body of a man about 5 feet long, resting in an aromatic liquid resembling mushroom ketchup and tasting of ketchup and Spanish olives. Mr. White admitted to a lack of the sense of smell and said in lieu of sniffing, he opted to taste the liquid instead. The body was reasonably well preserved except for the face and neck and part of one arm. The coffin had not been placed in a perfectly horizontal position, the feet being at least 3 inches lower than the head, and as the coffin was only half full of pickle, these parts of the body were not covered with it. It was noted that the jaws, when the coffin was first opened, were closed, but on being somewhat rudely touched, expanded, owing what was supposed to be the breaking of some bandage that bound them together. When the jaws were opened, they exhibited a set of perfectly white teeth, which were otherwise the colour of the palate and all of the inside of the mouth. Perfectly preserved feathers, flowers and herbs floated in the liquid. The man himself appeared in perfect condition and untouched by illness, with firm white flesh and symmetrical limbs. There was no hair on his head, or nor any found in the liquid. He was dressed in a linen shirt with narrow rude lace at the neck. There you go. Lovely. So hence mushroom ketchup, because I just felt we had to do it. Okay, so this recipe I got from a 1976 volume on preserving published by Marshall Cavendish. Hopefully there's no problems with that. Anyway, this recipe, differently from Mrs. Beeton's recipe of 1899, doesn't involve taking 3 days to produce the mushroom liquor. So what it did was took 3 pounds of mushrooms, or 1.35 kilograms of mushrooms, chopped them up, and then used 4 ounces of salt, or 100 grams of salt, sprinkled over the top of them, and left them for 24 hours. So that's what we saw at the beginning of that. So then I've drained off the liquor. Mrs. Beeton keeps the liquor, that's what her mushroom ketchup's made out of. But anyway, we shall explore that one perhaps later. This one, I've drained it off and rinsed with water. So now that goes into a pan. With a small onion and a clove of garlic. And a tablespoon of pickling spice, which I just need to crush a little bit. Mrs. Beeton's recipe has very similar spices in, with the exception of 2 blades of mace, so I could have put those in as well, but didn't. And a pint, or 600 ml of vinegar. This then needs to be boiled, so I'm just going to move over to the Arga. Nice. Looks quite gooey. Yep, so okay, so this just needs to be brought to the boil and then simmered for 45 minutes. So I'm going to cheat and put it actually in the oven to simmer, because otherwise it strips all the heat out of the Arga. So I'm just going to bring it to the boil on the surface. These are almost proofed, so they should spring back quite slowly when they're ready to go in the oven. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on the top of them. This one traditionally is a bloomer. You can either slice it across the angle or along the length. Just makes it easier to cut as well. A little bit. And that goes in then a very hot oven. Now the Arga oven is probably about 220, 240. About half an hour. So, done a little bit of local research. Jill Godson's books have been very helpful. I've raided the local library as well. There were windmills in Danbury which appear to have been moved round at various times, struck by lightning, which meant their final demise. So all of the windmills finished by 1893. In terms of bakers, there was a baker down by the Cricketers pub. There was also a baker's opposite the Baker's Arms, and one at Runsell Green. Interestingly, the Dunmows who, traffic noise, sorry. The Dunmows who were down opposite the Cricketers pub decided that Danbury was a very evil place, a very dark place, and they then moved up to the bakers at Runsell Green. So this is a dark place, Danbury, with its Pickled Knight. In terms of flour, there was obviously no local source of flour. I was hoping to get some flour from Beeley Steam Mill, which has been recently renovated by their team of volunteers, but sadly they're not up and running yet, so we'll have to wait on that. That's the Beeley Steam Mill. Unusually, they've got an elephant boiler, God knows what that is, and some beam engines, so that will be a sight to see when it's open. In terms of flour supply to the local bakers, it would have probably come from marriages. I did speak to marriages, and although the present people who are the 5th and 6th generation there don't go back to the 1960s, they certainly think before then they would have supplied the bakers in Danbury with their flour. So that's why I've used what I have today. Anyway, we'll hope and see they come out all right. I have to go and check. Okay, so the bread's been in the oven for about 25 minutes now. There's always a bit of a guessing game with an Aga, but I'm hoping it's all worked according to plan. So, a cottage loaf and a bloomer. I shall just let those cool. Make sure they sound right. Oh yes. Excellent. They should sound hollow when they're cooked, so just leave them to cool down. Right. And apparently the flour comes from Morsham, would you believe? There are local farms who supply marriages with flour, some of which are owned by marriages. So this is flour is from Morsham, which can't get much more local than that.
Hello, my name is Stephanie, and I have lived in Danbury for 40 years. I have yet to find a nicer village with people being welcoming, inviting you here, there and everywhere, and our children have all turned out to be a delight. A lot of that has got to do with the societies in the village. We've rainbows, brownies, everything, bridge clubs, but not to say the least, the Horticultural Society. The Horticultural Society is the reason for my making this cake for you today. My cake is, the ingredients are all local. The flour came from marriages. The strawberries came from a garden. One of the nicest societies in the village is the Horticultural Society. It's very diverse. It covers plants, fruits, but most importantly for me, cookery. I was asked to make a strawberry cake for one of the shows. And the title was Strawberry Cake of Your Choice. And I ended up with a strawberry cake with dirt. Let me show you how to make a strawberry cake with dirt. You make a basic Madeira mixture. You need to ensure that it is totally cold. Here is one I made earlier. I'm sure Mrs. Beaton wouldn't agree with that. So I've got 2 cakes. And I have 1 bowl of whipped double cream. And I've got my strawberries, which were rolled in dirt. They have been halved and are prepared to be assembled. So let's start with the double cream. And we put it on. Don't be mean. We don't count calories in this. Don't be mean. So we will spread it evenly all over the cake. Don't worry about how thick it is. That will all be sorted out. Make it slightly level so that we've got a nice smooth base. I have just washed my hands to make sure they're clean, as I will be handling the fruit straight from the bowl. The strawberries were prepared several hours ago so that they could release all their juices and be very, very succulent. Et voila! One cake with strawberries and dirt. So I submitted my creation for the judging. And in the afternoon, when I went to see how I had got on, I was horrified to find that my entry had been disqualified. And when I asked the judge why was I disqualified, they said, well, your strawberries were dirty. You didn't wash them. I said, it's not for me to contradict the judge. But may I point out that this is not dirt, it is black pepper. But my cake has gone down in the history of the Horticultural Society, and the number of requests I have had for my strawberry cake with dirt is endless.
So, welcome back. Thank you very much to Stephanie. I can now let you know what the secret of the strawberry cake with dirt is. So, what Stephanie does with the strawberries is to condition them. A bit like conditioning my mushrooms anyway. She conditions them by sprinkling them with sugar and coarsely ground black pepper once she's cut them in half, and leaving them to steep in that overnight so that the flavour of the strawberries really develops beautifully. So by the time you eat them, the black pepper tastes amazing with the strawberries. So that just about fits the bill, I hope. Anyway, I think the mushroom ketchup has probably done its simmering. Argos are a bit of a strange beast in that if you simmer stuff on the top of them, it strips all the heat out of them. So in actual fact, you can simmer things within the agar. So that's what it looks like now. And what I have to do is now strain this. Now Mrs. Beaton says about straining this through a hair sieve. Sorry, could you pass me the bowl there? Thank you. That's lovely. Now obviously I don't need a hair sieve because thankfully these days we have nylon, which is much more user friendly. I presume a hair would have been horsehair. No idea. But a metal sieve would have been no good because of the volume of vinegar in it. So let's have a go. I think I might have to do this in a couple of batches. Oops. So apparently I've got to push this through the sieve. And then reboil the liquid again and stick it in a bottle. Discard all the bits of mushroom. It smells quite overpowering, actually. You certainly get the smell of the mushrooms and the spices and the vinegar. I reckon this will need thickening up a bit, but it doesn't. I might have to boil it for a while. That's good. Gosh, messy business this. You can never forget about using gauntlets when you've got an agar, otherwise you end up with burns all down your arms. So everything that comes out is absolutely sizzling hot. Gosh, that's absolutely eye-wateringly stinging. That's good. Part of the reason for being interested in the Pickled Knight and the mills, etc., is because this property was actually once part of St Clair's Manor, and possibly the original gatehouse for the St Clair's Manor would have been on this site. We've certainly found evidence while we've been doing building work of previous buildings that are possibly burnt down or whatever. When this building was first built, it was part of Danbury Park, so it was built by John and Susan Round in 1832. Originally called the London Lodge, and their estate was called Danbury Park, not Danbury Palace. Sadly, Mrs. Round had a fear that she was going to die in a fire. And so the Palace building, or what was Danbury Park building, was built with 3 staircases, one of which was a stone staircase. Unfortunately, they went on holiday to London, stayed in a hotel, and there was a fire in the hotel, and she went back to get her jewels and died in the fire. After that, her husband sold the whole estate to the church, and it became the residence of the Bishop of Rochester. So the mitre that you see on the outside of the building is actually the Bishop of Rochester's mitre, and obviously then, because it's a bishop's residence, it then is a palace. So since then it has been a palace, and although this was originally the London Lodge, it's masqueraded under various titles since. The one on the Ordnance Survey map is Main Lodge, and now is known as the Gatehouse. So that's where we are today. I wish actually we'd kept it as the Main Lodge. Didn't really realise, but that's where we are left. Thank you. Right, just put that in there. I need to reboil it again. Okay guys, I'm not entirely convinced the mushroom ketchup experiment has been successful, but anyway, take that off the heat now. It certainly smells quite amazing. These Kilner jars are pre-war, kindly given to me by my friend Michael Ford, who lives just over the back of the Wood Hill Road. So, okay. I will try it again later. I'm not going to taste it at the moment, but hang on just a bit. I will, excuse me. I was just saying, my memories of picking mushrooms as a child up in Leicester at my aunt's place around the edge of the field. These mushrooms actually came from Poland. So now, this is what the embalming fluid that the Pickled Knight was floating in tasted like. Oh my God! That's awful!
No wonder he was dead. No wonder he died.